emotions within, and when you keep a lot of emotions within, you know, you can get angry. And so if you look across various cultures, especially the tribal cultures, whenever there is any death in the family or anything, you know, the way they celebrate death, especially the men, they just dance it out. They just dance and they go crazy about the death. And I used to wonder, like, why is it a celebration? And I think this whole dancing is dancing out the anger. And we look at our cultures, and we don't have that. When people die, you're just there sitting quietly and thinking about it and probably sulking within, and there should probably be an outlet in some way. I mean, so if religion has been formed by humans, maybe we should just form our own kind of religion where it's an antidote to all these things. And there was also a very interesting article in the New York Times which talked about how by teaching men to be powerful and not expressing themselves is actually leading to a lot of problems, suicidal cases, and you know, so many things. And you'll end up being doing other stuff, like probably take a gun, kill somebody else. And so you need an outlet for all that. And I know what kind of outlet you can have. It's nice to be nice to everyone around you, but probably you should have, this is an idea came up with a friend, probably should have like a moving punch bag van which goes from the financial district to the school, and you want to punch it out, just go inside and just take out your anger.
Or cry.
Or just cry, you know, just do what you want to do. A confession can be in any form. Maybe art. Right? But not many people find the patience for it. Yeah, that's the best thing that you can do.
So the whole topic of strength as one of the 4 pillars here. How have you guys represented strength in your art? You know, maybe you could bounce off that for a bit. Because we're talking about what it means to be strong and definitions that have ensued, you know.
So for me, the strength alone is not the physical strength. It's the mental, emotional, and the spiritual strength. So those are the 3 things that I portrayed as. Emotional would be this piece on vulnerability, the piece being there. Those are all building up your emotional strength by talking to people, expressing yourself. So the strength is not just physical, but how do I say that? To build it within yourself. So these are like little tools, little things that you can just build strength within yourself.
I think the piece that I responded to most with the strength idea was the ship.
Yes.
And I think that one is interesting because that's where there's no person seen and that there isn't a woman portrayed in the piece. So this is a story of the Middle Passage and the slave trade from Africa to the New World. And really, if you look at everybody of color or African people in the United States and in the Caribbean, they're people that descendants came from those ships, and it's really a story of the strength for the person that survived that journey, and it's really the woman that's in the hull of that ship is the strength that allows us to be here today.
Also, the strength in beauty is interesting to me. That beauty is a powerful weapon against ugliness and a kind of a death. I think sometimes men are told they have to look tough and they have to look dangerous and they have to look like, you know, they're the bad guy. But the truth is that the beauty of a lotus or a plant or a flower, that's real beauty because it celebrates itself no matter where it grows, and it accepts its death, it accepts the whole life journey in a way that's beautiful, and it defies death because the seeds come back. And so I think the model that we see, the toughness male model, is really a frightened model. It's men who have been damaged by their men who are afraid, they've been made to feel afraid,
Mm.
and their life has been contained into a very small box because of that fear.
I'm sorry to interrupt that flow, but a dear friend Raghu, who's here from Hawaii, has to leave. But I had requested him. We were talking before we started the session, the panel, and he mentioned a very interesting point about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and maybe you can take a few minutes and share some of that with us and what Mahaprabhu stood for, etc. Yeah, because he has to leave. Yeah.
The problem that I had is that I was building up this whole quick, short summary of Lord Chaitanya. But you guys just came along and hit all these buttons in me. So leave it to him to find such a collection of variety of artistic expression. And so I just wanted to put just sort of a little side. Daria, you're fascinating with the layers of historic and cultural. It's not just the history; it's the way you were touching on how they're starting to come together. And Donna, with you and the herbs, and then bringing it back around to Mother Earth, basically. And very amusing that you went off to become a nurse, something you discovered that's your lineage. So, of course, what are you going to do? So, I would be completely, not just enthralled, but so excited. And I don't know if you've already done that. If you could, I'm trying to imagine how you would express what you're talking about artistically. That would be absolutely fascinating for you to be able to encapsulate all those different elements and what that would look like. And your story with your boy, that is a story for women and moms and boys the world over. How would you portray that? So you guys have really done a beautiful job of coming and starting to touch upon this collection of dynamics that you generally don't get to see with an artist off in their own corner. So thank you so much for bringing this kind of, and so what it was reminding me of, I grew up in India. I'm, third generation Italian American, born in Hollywood. Mom became a Hare Krishna, sent me to India to learn the Vedas. And so I caught the tail end, this is the 70s, so I go back before the time for most of you. The tail end of I couldn't believe you had a third point. The tail end of the British Raj Indians. And it was in Vrindavan, which was actually a real village back then. It's all built out now. So I got exposed to the gurus that were teaching yoga. And it was all so rigid. And now to see the American and Western women teaching yoga today is so, it's goddess-esque by compare. It's so flowing, and the areas that they've gotten into and the nuances that they've really brought out, it's just so scrumptious and yummy. At least from the little exposure I had to yoga of the male-dominated versus the women taking it as their own. I had a friend that also grew up with me there, and he was just a voracious reader, unlike most, especially 80s men. And he would read, a book a day sometimes, and he just ran out of books to read after about 8 years. So he started going, the internet had just come out. So he started going and reading all these works of these professors from around India that had not gotten any recognition out in Benares and Ahmedabad and all these little places. And it was almost bashful, almost apologetic, because they were trained in the British India. And so they were taking to their culture very slowly. and he would summarize their work, and he created a whole of about 800 professors from around the world. And so what they were able to do when they came together was a collage view that had never been seen before. That's what this event reminds me of. And so the one side was the Indians coming together, and now you have the same thing playing out in the other indigenous cultures of the world, where they're now gone out, become professors, and now they're coming together collectively, and we're beginning to get a whole new perspective and view, not just of those cultures, but our history, the way you were touching about your history and how it plays out. And what I realized tonight is that one of the most exciting and exquisite and gorgeous is going to be this collective collage of the goddess energy from around the world. So this was a small little. So I'll just get to your Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I'm really happy that you're getting into the Vedic and Indian goddess, because it seems a little bit better. I don't want to say better developed. India just has a way of adding dimension to things that are just so off the scale of anything else. And so I had a friend, and he's gay, so he went through the Mahabharata, he went through the Brahmagyan and the Vedas to find all these stories of that male-female, which was just an entirely different accentuation. I didn't realize how much of this theme of the male-female, but it's generally told as the men awakening or dealing with the feminine side. And so the variety and depth that they get. So Arjuna, and he was cursed, and so he could be a woman for a year, and so how that played out. And then you had one king, and he was cursed to become a woman, and he was devastated, and he went and pleaded, please, said, okay, we cursed you, we can't take it back, but we can make it for a year. At the end of that year, he's a man again, and he's like, you know what, the lovemaking was so much better as a woman. He gave up his kingdom for it. You have Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is Gopeshwara. So he was, and Lord Shiva is like the king of the gods until he's Gopeshwara. And now he's just wishing he could be a gopi girl, because he was a little bit he was being snubbed a little bit. And what Gaudiya Vaishnavism is specifically, so Indian philosophy is just, they just take things and they just, so here's an interesting way of putting it. So if you have a writer, and they take their, if I gave you 5 points and gave each of you those 5 points, you would end up with a different article. But if the 5 of you or 5 of you got together, you would end up with a piece that's entirely different, because a 6th mind was created between you. So in spiritual mathematics is 1 + 1 = 3, and we get some sense of that with a man and a woman. So when the Lord and us creates a 3rd power, and that is love, and that is goddess. So in their hierarchy, if you will, there's the Lord, there's the goddess, and then there's us. And the whole lesson of this world is to learn love. That's the classroom lesson. And everything else is a practice run or love betrayed. So spirituality is so dynamic, and it's always changing, like God, finds his limit and then he breaks it. But the biggest challenge that he's had is understanding goddess. Like that's the one that he's like, and he's like, how can she love me so much? How can she, have these qualities? So in that portrayal, the biggest mind blower the good Lord is dealing with is the God. She's just always getting better with him, with her charm and her. So in order to understand that, he comes as Lord Chaitanya. So he's like, okay, I'm going to come in so I can try to understand, because I can't do it as Krishna, so I have to fall in love with myself as So you've heard of the Hare Krishnas. So we think that it's worship of Krishna, but actually it's the worship of Radha.
Rather.
So we're not followers of Krishna, and a lot of devotees don't know this. We're actually followers of Radha.
Rather.
And so she's the back door. So the chanting of Hare Krishna is talking to the love of God. What can I do to, what can I do? What service can I do for you? Because that is the ultimate culmination of love. So that, as my educational upbringing, I've gotten into writing on politics. And so what I realized is that the reason why the central power, the primary power of America is its principle of freedom. And I realized that freedom itself is God's religion. So religion is what we practice to get to God, but freedom is the religion that God practices in order to deal with us. And the point there is that in order to honor love, he must give us that choice. That's the reason why it has such a universality. Freedom is the Lord's honor of the goddess principle. So anyway, that's just a quick summary of...
Thank you, Raghu. Thank you.